Ah, the spiritual successor. In the last 4 to 5 years, we've got a pretty good handful of spiritual successor games. Undertale, Hat in Time, Bug Fables. There's something about new games taking inspiration from great classics that can spawn new classics. One great classic that brings a rush of memories from the Nintendo 64 era is Banjo-Kazooie. Enter Yooka Laylee. So I'm just gonna say this right off the bat. I really wish I started reviewing again in 2017, as opposed to 2021. It practically feels like I'm playing catch-up here. At this point, I was starting to get back into gaming and watching game reviews, but my itch to actually make reviews hadn't begun to develop yet. Yooka Laylee, Hat in Time, Mario Odyssey, Breath of the Wild. Are you kidding me? For much of the 2010s, the side-scroller platformer genre had come back into popularity, making their comeback off the nostalgia felt for great 8 and 16-bit games from 20-plus years prior. There are some great games that have come out of this, but with it came oversaturation. While it started around New Super Mario Bros., showing that there's a thirst for the classics, I think it really turned into a second wave. This doesn't feel like an old genre renewed anymore. More or less just a standard. There's nothing wrong with that. Shooter and RPG games have always had this going for them. Looks like there's nothing about the 2D platformer that's truly dated itself as a genre. But with oversaturation comes fatigue for some people. I know more recently I felt kinda jaded from that genre, and hesitant to continue buying new 2D platformers. Enter the second coming of the 3D platformer. Lately, I've been playing tons of old GameCube games that I've been nostalgic for. Mario Sunshine, Paper Mario, Wind Waker. I even played through the crappy old Harry Potter games just because of that nostalgia bug. For people who grew up in the GameCube, Xbox, PS2 era, the 3D platformer was a genre oversaturating the market. There are some great classics to come out of this era that roam the nostalgia centers in our brain. One of the games considered to be high on the list of classic 3D platformers was Banjo-Kazooie back on the Nintendo 64, developed by Rareware. A Kickstarter began by a newcomer company called Playtonic, and it consists of the old guys who used to work with Rareware. Yooka Laylee, a spiritual successor to Banjo-Kazooie. Nostalgia buttons pressed. I mean, I'll be honest, they had me at opportunity to steal joke from Ant Dude. So the general consensus I got out of reviews of this game was sort of overall disappointment. In fact, I feel like my own perception of this game soured after I finished it. I played it, I relatively enjoyed it, wasn't great, wasn't terrible. Overall, it was pleasant, but some things were frustrating, and after seeing those things I initially noticed placed in a review form, what was first a nice trip through memory lane to give me some good laughs and some nice banjo flashbacks. Upon watching these reviews, I was reminded of some of the trash minigames in the arcade, the occasional jank moments, and just reflecting on how much the ability to fly literally breaks the game. The sweet was turned sour. My yum became a yuck. My treasure turned into trash. My nostalgia turned into regret. All those donations wasted. Wait, hold up a second. Is Yooka Laylee really that bad? Come on. Many Rareware games in retrospect are actually getting the same kind of flack anyway. Donkey Kong 64, Banjo-Tooie, Conker's Bad Fur Day, and Star Fox Adventures all take plenty of an objective beating on technical gameplay-based elements. In fact, Rareware has a little bit of a history of having to rush out something that isn't fully polished. Good, but almost great is kind of their thing. Is this really all that different from a typical Rareware outing? Let's unravel this, shall we? We start with Yooka and Laylee relaxing, when all their pages get stolen, being sucked into a factory that we must now go infiltrate. The evil capital B, with all his glorious puns, is stealing the world's pages. Honestly, I'm not gonna give away too much of the story, because there's not a whole lot to talk about. Besides some setup at the beginning and end, the story mostly stays out of your way once you're in the factory. It mostly plays out in optional interactions with the world's NPCs and general details in the world. It draws parallels to Banjo-Kazooie, and it's kept very simple. And it's got some great laughs. I talk about Rareware charm and personality, but this game is more Rareware than a lot of Rareware games in this department. Seriously, puns freaking galore. A lot of NPCs are really fun too. Shovel Knight makes an appearance, griping that he can't come to grips with the third dimension and needs your help. Oh, gotta love it. This game doesn't take itself seriously and it wears it on its sleeve. Definitely something I was missing in later stage Rareware games. I'm not gonna lie, I love everything about the presentation of this game. The characters, the dialogue, the puns, the aesthetic. Aside from the Factory Hive, which is honestly genius, the game has 5 chapters, portrayed in the form of physical books. After we get some opening tutorial stuff, we start off on the first chapter, TRIBALSTACK TROPICS. Aesthetically, it's very much the typical open world starter level. It's quite packed with things to do though, with some stuff blocked off for when you collect enough pages to expand the world. Once expanded, it's even bigger and still packed with things to do. I think this level shows the full potential of what this game could do. If the whole game was as packed as this first level is, it would be a masterpiece. I think this is why a lot of people were somewhat disappointed as they got further into the game. I want to talk a little bit about the overworld. Hivory Towers is kind of like your Banjo or Mario castle. I think the setup for it is genius, and overall it actually makes a pretty good overworld. Like you find in some games like Zelda, there's some great shortcuts created between different areas of the game to help you backtrack and explore with greater ease. I think the main issues of this overworld arise when you get the flying ability, as the later part of the towers were made with this in mind, but not the earlier sections. It ends up becoming an easy way to cheese your way around some of the challenges depending on when you get the flying ability in relation to when you're exploring certain levels. There's some pages to collect while you explore this overworld, and most of them are basic, but the same can be said for games like Mario or Banjo. It's satisfying when you collect an ability, then you remember something from earlier that was blocked off and go, oh yeah, and then get rewarded for remembering that thing was there. I think where people's frustrations come in are in things that feel like a tease. This big tower, for example, just looks like something you're gonna have to solve this big giant puzzle for. Do some kind of massive infiltration. I think people might have actually been expecting another chapter to be hiding in there. But nah, it's just a domino puzzle. Hit the switch to knock the books over and they domino their way into this button and you get the pagey. Easy peasy. Each area of the tower is themed to match the area you're about to enter. For example, the swamp level is surrounded by swampy area. The area around the snow level is covered by snow. And the snow area is called GLITTERGLAZE GLACIER. I'm sorry. I lost my train of thought because I thought that was smooth. But now it's awkward, so... Yeah, anyway. The GLITTERGLAZE GLACIER has a healthy balance of snowy areas, underwater areas, and cave areas to explore, with a few new areas unlocked after you expand the world. This map has a healthy amount of content to explore through, while not as packed as TRIBALSTACK, still provides some great exploration and puzzle-solving goodness to continue scratching that platforming itch. Or maybe even ice it with a cooling solution. But you know what keeps me cool? Good controls! Yooka Laylee's controls take much after Banjo-Kazooie, but they feel lighter. While Banjo is a bear who's got some weight to him, Yooka is a light lizard, and I think his movement is reflected in that to an extent. Laylee gifts him with a double jump, similar to how Kazooie does with Banjo. As you go through the game, you're given the ability to use quills to purchase moves and expand your moveset. Compared with Donkey Kong 64 and some of the other Rareware games in the past, this might be the most natural iteration of the moveset expansion concept that Rareware has implemented to date. It doesn't feel bare, and it definitely doesn't feel overly complicated, because by the time you have the full moveset, you've had plenty of practice using all of them. Now, the quality of their implementation varies, but the only move I found to even be mildly offensive was the ability to fly. The control of this move is kinda jank, and the ability to flat out break areas of the game is kinda dumb.
Whenever you have a character that allows you to fly, you open yourselves up to all kinds of difficult possibilities, because if you can fly, you can get around pretty much any puzzle and any obstacle. So ultimately, the wind-type warriors didn't make the cut.
I want to emphasize, though, that this doesn't just ruin the experience of playing the game. Maybe just dampen it a little, as opposed to drenching it, or dare I even say, submerging it. Speaking of water, the swamp. Damn it. The swamp area provides more platforming challenge, along with a few underwater levels, providing a decent starting overworld with a well-balanced expansion of such. In my opinion, feeling even more balanced than the snow area. It was actually at this point where I started to wonder why I felt disappointment at the conclusion of my initial playthrough. Here you gain a tongue ability that diversifies your moveset even more, allowing you to reach some pretty fun heights in some of these challenges. There's this great underwater area that provides what I thought was a fun platforming challenge. Up to this point in the game, I'll be honest, this provides much of the platforming and story elements I loved from a game like Banjo-Kazooie, without the bloat of a game like Donkey Kong 64 or Banjo-Tooie. But like I said, up to this point, Capital Casino starts well enough. Obviously, Capital B, in disguise, tells you about a system of trading in collectible tokens for pages. I honestly don't mind this concept at all. It helps break things up a little bit, and I think it also adds a little bit of flavor. I like the aesthetic of this area, as well as some of the platforming challenges within. I would agree that, especially after the expansion, this stage feels a little empty compared to its size. They definitely could have added more content. It doesn't ruin the stage for me, though. The boss in this stage is played through a minecart section. And there's the segue to cart off this next topic and keep the review on track. So stupid. One way you can collect pages is to go through these minecart obstacle courses. I've seen a bunch of other reviewers that I actually like bash these sections, and I'm sorry, but I'm gonna have to disagree. I had fun playing through these. It's like the minecart sections in Donkey Kong Country, but they eased up on the difficulty and gave you a few more moves to work with. Yeah, it moves a little slower, but it gives you the ability to speed up and slow down, so they're not going to design it in such a way where you only have a second to think the whole time. In the swamp area, they even changed up the course layout so they can circle around until you take a specific path, adding a break from the straightforward formula that was with the other courses. I love the one in GALLEON Galaxy where they reduce the gravity. This doesn't feel monotonous to me, it just feels creative. Does everything in video games have to be instantaneous? Take a breath, drink a beer, go for a walk. Relax, my dude. I might as well talk about the other gimmicks this game has to offer since I mentioned the minecarts. This Cloud Wants to Race, which can be a fun challenge. Each course has an optional boss fight hidden within. My favorite is this crater wife who you fight by unjustly murdering her husband. I kind of like how the game flips the story on you. In every way, you're the bad guy. I actually felt really bad re-killing the husband crater to re-initiate the fight every time I lost. There's this version of mini golf they create where you gotta push this ball into the hole. Honestly though, this was kinda lame, but okay, not every pagey has to be amazing. Not every star in Mario 64 is good, but the game is still an innovative work. The one thing in this game I didn't like, the one thing that truly pissed me off, the one thing I actually found offensive, and in this playthrough, I actually saved them till after I beat the game to even do them at all, because I hated them the first time, and playing through to get footage just, reconfirmed that, yeah, these arcade games suck. These minigames are some of the laziest schlock I've seen in minigame form in a long time. Honestly, skip these and your playthrough will be 1,000 times better. No more messing around though. No more segues, no more puns. I mean business. The one stage where the game falls apart for a lot of people is GALLEON Galaxy. I'm not going to pretend this is the worst stage I've ever played. Far from it, in fact. Once the world is expanded, there's a lot of stuff here, and I really like it, honestly. But before you expand it, what the hell is this? Most of the other stages felt like at least a stage, even if a little barren without the expansion. But this stage makes the biggest argument for how the expansion concept can fail. This is the first thing in the game that poses evidence to me that maybe they should have spent a little more time working on the game. Maybe it needed a little more polish. Okay, but why is it that almost every Rareware game I've played up to this point, besides Banjo-Kazooie and Donkey Kong 64, feel like they needed more time to cook? Even Cameo, strangely enough, even though that game probably has the opposite problem of sitting in development hell for too long, Rareware is almost notorious for just missing the ball. They always produce good products that could have been great. Just come up with something better for the arcade games and rework the expanded Galleon Galaxy, and you have a great game on your hands. An argument for the return of the 3D platformer. Not just a wonderful nostalgia trip, but a demand for a legitimate genre that still deserves a spotlight. As much as it shows flashes of greatness from an era of old, it still shows some of the flaws that used to come with these games. I also don't know whose brilliant idea it was to take that garbage memory test that nobody loved and keep throwing it back into Rareware games, but they did it again to be funny, and it wasn't. I hated it. This is the kind of thing that reminds me of all the problems I've had with Rareware games throughout the years, not the nostalgic memories I have for them. All that said though, as frustrating as that is, by no standard, this or last generation is this a bad game. Everything I just mentioned, that's it. That's all my complaints. A second playthrough of this rekindled all those Banjo flashbacks. I didn't need to play the arcade games. I didn't have to spend even 10 minutes in Galleon Galaxy before realizing it was obvious what was wrong in just upgrading the level. I guess now we've got one last thing to cover. Capital B. It's actually pretty challenging, forcing you to learn its pattern. This is almost perfect. I'm not sure if this is from a lack of skills, but I died a lot during one of its later phases, forcing me to redo earlier phases. Part of me really wishes that there were checkpoints when you completed a phase, but in defense of this, it's only what other N64 era games would make you do with multi-phase bosses. If you're going to be drawing inspiration from the oldies and try to keep it as faithful as possible, you're bound to pick up from some of the flaws that came with that era. And unfortunately, that's kind of the story with Yooka Laylee. It may not have scratched the platformer itch I had completely, but it did prompt me to go back and play the old platformers I used to love. By all means, I want to call this a spiritual successor, even though it's not a perfect game. Yooka Laylee is a good callback and a good game. I think the hype was just a little too high. I mean, how couldn't it be? Look at all these backers. So many backers. Okay, we get it. Jesus Christ, that's a lot of freaking why are there so many backers? Even when I fast forward at full speed, I'm just getting nowhere. Like 700 people named Christian, what the hell? Anyway though, Playtonic continues to develop, and ironically, they brought an amazing outing back to the side-scroller platformer genre.
Saturation. Side-scroller platformer genre. Dude, I miss this genre. It was my childhood. Is this really all that different from a typical Rareware outing?
If you can fly, you can get around pretty much any puzzle and any obstacle.
3D platformer is a genre over graduating to work.
Step right up and win valuable prizes!
Shovel Knight makes an appearance.
Because parallels to Banjo-Kazooie, all the nostalgia centers in our brain.
But they did it again to be funny.
And it wasn't.
They're finally together and stronger as two. Yooka and Laylee are real cool.
But they did it again to be funny.
And it wasn't.
If you can fly, you can get around pretty much any puzzle and any obstacle.
Side-scroller platformer genre. I think I broke the video.